Daniel Pemberton, an Oscar nominee for the Trials of Chicago 7 this year, is back with Being the Ricardos, new film from Aaron Sorkin, out December 10th before coming to Amazon on December 21st. Daniel, you've done all three of Aaron's films as a director. How has your working relationship with him, I guess, evolved since Molly's Game?
Well, I first met Aaron on Steve Jobs, actually. I sat next to him and Molly from Molly's Game at the Golden Globes, rather randomly. And that was the first time we'd actually met. And he was kind of talking about like moving into directing and that he really loved my score to Steve Jobs. And it's been a really amazing journey working with him. Also, just like watching him like just progress as a director. Every film, it's really spectacular. You've got to remember, Molly's Game he was literally a first-time director on that movie, and it's been a really solid relationship between us, because it's like a great relationship with directors is where there's a level of trust, and it's hard to get that trust until you've done a bunch of projects together. And every film we do, there's great discussion between us both about like how are we going to make this work. And what was interesting, when our first one, Molly's Game, he was like, I wanted an orchestral score. And I was like, no, you don't. You want a contemporary score. And he let me go and do that, which was great. And it was that great level of trust. And he was like, oh, you make the right call. And what I love about him as a collaborator is he trusts you, and he wants your input on things. And there's still, obviously, you'll always have pushback, and from both of us, we'll push back on scenes and trying to get things the best they can be for the movie. But by the time it came to Ricardos, it was like, right, this is what I'm thinking. And he was like, well, that's what I'm thinking too. And so, it was it's always a pleasurable experience working with him. I think he's such a visionary.
So let me ask you then, what were you guys thinking for the score here? I've seen the movie, I heard of it. I'd love to hear, like, what were your goals for the music for this one? And like, what were your conversations like?
Well, like I read the script, and like whenever you read a Sorkin script, the first thing you kind of go is like, oh shit, where do I fit in? But because they're so amazing, and there's so much in there. It's like you don't always find the space straight away of where you can kind of turn up as the composer. But we both decided that this film needed a kind of almost a really classic golden age orchestral score. And my kind of take on it was that, like, for me, is I'm British, and it's I Love Lucy is not part of my cultural makeup as it is for most of America. And that was a very interesting challenge for this project, of like trying to look through the eyes as an outsider of this thing, which in some ways is it feels like a defining aspect of the American cultural psyche. And I wanted to write, I felt this film needed a kind of a really classic, strong thematic approach of a big theme that would work through the film and conclude at the end. And for me, that was like the first challenge, was like, how do I write a theme that can sum up this entire story?
Right. Well, the other thing too, you kind of mentioned it a little there, but like, you also have this incredibly iconic I Love Lucy theme that I'm sure people like just know, even if they've never seen it. And you don't incorporate that really, or do you incorporate that in the score? I guess, like, did you try to like totally ignore that, or what were your thoughts? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, like we talked about that early on, and we kind of felt the best thing to do was sort of ignore that. It does turn up in the film, but the film in some ways is more about Lucy and Desi and their relationship and Lucy's experiences, really. And I wanted to create something that was separate from the show, because it felt like we're telling a different story. Like, one of the things Aaron was, very adamant about is like, in those classic scenes that are so iconic, we're not scoring those for laughs. We are scoring them to understand why those scenes became funny, and understanding Lucille's like very complex thought processes to make something that seems effortlessly like throwaway and funny. We're trying to like show her brain and how she's thinking about those moments.
Right. You also mentioned this a little earlier about trying to find space within Aaron's scripts. He's so obviously known for his quick wit, and the dialogue is so sharp and everything. When you're writing the music, do you think about trying to complement that, or how do you keep up with that? I guess, like, or do you totally go in the opposite direction? Like, what are your thoughts like on trying to handle that kind of screenplay?
Yeah, I mean, like every film I do, I try and do very differently. So I don't have like, here's my set way of working. And every time I approach a film, I try and approach it very differently. So the way I approach this film is completely different to The Rescue, which is the other thing I've got out at the moment. And then I'm doing like Spider-Verse 2 at the moment. And they're all such different ways of looking at things. So with this one, I think the first thing I really wanted to do was nail the theme. So I spent a long time just sitting at the piano, just writing, just sitting there trying things out. And the weirdest thing is I didn't really finish it. I kind of got halfway through it and I'd come to the Oscars. And that was the first time I'd seen Aaron for like a year, because we did all of Chicago 7. I met him once for a drink in the Four Seasons bar after the Golden Globes. We chatted for an hour about what we wanted to do on Chicago 7. The whole world shut down. I didn't see him. I didn't see anyone in production. Go to the Oscars. I see him for about 5 minutes until he gets ushered away. And that was my only experience with him. And so I'd had this piano idea, and I ended up staying at this guy, Phil Lord, who's one that Spider-Verse produces, house in Malibu, which was great. And I just end up writing it. He has a beautiful big grand piano there. I was like, hey, I'm living like the Hollywood dream. I'm literally in a super nice house sitting by a grand piano, and I finished the theme off there. And that is the kind of cornerstone to everything else in the score. And once we had that would drive how I would score the other moments in the film. So big emotional bits of, everything is seeded from the score. I could play on the piano now, but I don't know if that's a good move. Do you want to hear on the piano? I don't know. Let's do it over here. It's like a double gold. Right, hang on. My flat's a tip. Let's just see. Let's just see if this is going to work. Right, so it goes like this. It goes like...
Yeah.
So you might take the chords from... And then in that, you might just, there'd be a scene and you might just take these... You might just take those chords and loop them around, or we've got this melody, this... Mm-hmm. So that would be how I would end up like pulling these other things away. With this, it was like, this film is all about the emotion and the melodic continuity of this story. And it would be finding engines and ways to throw that into all the different elements of the story.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I just like listening to it there. It's just so, the tone is so perfect and so melancholy for, I think, the film. And you really get like just a lot of it. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I can't imagine topping that, seeing you perform it. Daniel Pemberton, being the Ricardos, composer, Aaron Sorkin's new film out December 10th in theaters before it comes to Amazon on December 21st. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you. All right. See you later.
Aaron and Bryce Dessner, the composers and songwriters, composers for Cyrano, Joe Wright's new musical based on Cyrano de Bergerac, out in theaters December 31st. You guys, I know this obviously started as a stage version with Erica Schmidt, who wrote it in Connecticut and then off Broadway, and then obviously now a film. can you talk about how the music evolved across those three, levels, I guess?
The theatrical run was this amazing. Basically the theatrical version had an underscore for 2 hours that is completely unrelated to any music that's in the film. So even during the dialogue, there was music always kind of running like a heartbeat, and it was kind of more like an installation or something because the music never stopped. And then there were a bunch of songs, almost probably like 9 or 10 songs in the theatrical version that are not in the film, and then songs in the film that are not in the theater. So they're almost unrecognizable in ways, I would say, from each other. But I can say that in terms of how the songs would fit the narrative, the way the two would work, our songs are not sort of extroverted needle drop, Broadway style songs. So how does this sort of intimate poetry of our type of writing work with the narrative? I mean, that was really what we had a chance to try in the theater. And then eventually, like about a year and a half ago when Joe Wright actually saw it in the early workshops. He was there for the theater as well. So his idea for the film started very early. So it was like we were writing for that from the very beginning, really, because he was, Haley Bennett, who was his partner, was it plays Roxanne. So Joe was there kind of in some of the early, just sort of readings, basically. So we had the opportunity to really kind of work with him for quite a while as well.
That's awesome. You mentioned, I read an interview, guys, you talked about maybe giving Eric, I think you called it sketches, national sketches maybe, or this sketches of songs that you had. And you kind of talked about this a little, but how did, what would you say is the difference between a national song and what we're hearing in this? And did you think of it like that or not at all, I guess?
Well, I think it was the first time that we were writing in service of a narrative that is not sort of personal or about your own, a lot of our band songs are very personal. And so this was, I think, the very nature of it was different, but I think we had so much, we tend to generate a lot of music just to do it, not necessarily specifically for anything. And a lot of those things, we call them sketches because they're in song form or they're a theme. And they would often find a home in the national, but at some point it was really exciting to sort of take them to a different place, and they feel almost like some inversion of something we might do for a national, but that's set in this sort of Baroque, modern, hard to place world and in service of the narrative. And then the actual score, because there's, everything, the entire score for Cyrano the movie, is unique to the film, and that was sort of, it's inspired by the songs that are the songs that the actors sing, but it's kind of felt like something when Joe decided to make this film, that was kind of the much deeper dive that happened. But fortunately we had those years of sort of workshopping the actual songs, which then we were able to develop further.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the thing that's amazing to me about the songs and the score in the movie is that while it is in service of the narrative, it feels so universal and almost personal. When you're watching, I think it comes across, the emotions of the music comes across, even though it's in service of this story that's obviously decades and decades old, centuries old. It's really remarkable. I think your music plays so well with the story. I love that about it. I know Joe the actors were live singing on the set. Can you talk about your involvement on there? I obviously COVID times, it was certainly a closed set, but were you able to go, and what were your involvement with the performers while as they're singing your music?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Europe, and so I was able to get in, and it was actually weirdly the end of August, September last year when they started shooting, and it was a kind of brief respite from the, some rules relaxed a little bit that I could travel. So I was there for the 3 weeks of rehearsal and a bunch of the shooting, and it was amazing. I mean, it was, really, I have to credit, Joe Wright, the director, really insisted on wanting to capture live vocals, which, we have performed on TV for the better part of 20 years, and we know, or live recordings, it's they're rarely are they flattering, so it's kind of, at first we were, these are not, singers acting, these are actors singing, and so we thought, oh, that's going to be brutal. But they were just, especially the three principals, Kelvin Harrison Jr. who plays Christian, Peter Dinklage who plays Cyrano, and Haley Bennett who plays Roxanne. They were so courageous, and so the one whole week of rehearsals was basically I was running, where we built We did do pre-records we kind of built a studio within this Baroque theater in Noto, Sicily, which is already this kind of gorgeous, location where it was all shot, but there's no recording studio, right? So we showed up and had to kind of build this box. In that space, a lot of actual score elements were also, Joe is a director who really loves to have music on set. And I think for his past films, Dari, who did those scores, would actually be there and be creating things, and they'd be piping music and shooting certain scenes. So he kind of really wanted to hear what the score was going to sound like. And so, I was able, with Aaron from a distance to kind of develop a lot of ideas in the weeks, months leading up to shooting, especially in the case of orchestrating songs. It's not like the orchestration is kind of dialed on after. It's like, especially because it's this, this universe in which we're playing guitars and pianos and things we do in our band or we do on our own, but then there's this kind of Baroque orchestration and, classical piano and, some folk elements like fiddle or accordion, and like all of that he really wanted to hear. Well, because the film's shot around the music, it's not, like normally when you score a film, which you've done a lot of, you get a kind of edited or close to finished thing, and then it goes different ways. But this was interesting because we were involved from the very beginning, and being there, just especially in terms of the architecture of Noto and Sicily. And the visual team was all there, and this like vast collaboration really influenced the sound of the score.
That's awesome. Were there were there any other influences, I guess, musically that you guys were thinking of when you were doing this beyond your own music as the national, and just like your own taste, I guess? I'm just curious about that. Like other, I don't even know, like other eras of music or anything.
I mean, I think that the score itself has a sense of kind of, again, the Baroque, the kind of like, prelude or fugue, these sort of, and also I guess that it sits in between that, the Baroque space of what Noto and the visual design of it. And then I would say the 19th century kind of French nature of the original Edmond de Rostand play. The songs occupy the space that the letters would have, the kind of long monologues in verse, which, the original Cyrano, actually, Alexandre can probably tell us how long it is, but I think it's like the better part of 3 or 4 hours. So for a modern audience, I think that's really the brilliance of Erica Schmidt's idea, was that the songs would replace what would have been, long sections of spoken, word, beautiful poetry, but, and so in terms of like, there's songs for us that it's all in our wheelhouse kind of, but it's new to us as well, the way these songs are realized. There are elements of kind of like Joe loves electronics and kind of rougher things that sound kind of haphazard or almost improvised. So there's elements of sort of wildness. And like I said, there's live fiddle that we literally tracked in Sicily with Sam Amidon, who's one of the cadets who's singing in Wherever I Fall, which is the big song at the end. But then there's things that are much more, through compose. And I would say that the way that the songs weave into the score and weave out and all of that, it feels, I've worked on a bunch of films, and usually for me, like 40 minutes is a lot of music in a film, where in this one there's 80 minutes of music. So it was a big lift to kind of make it all work, but it was also an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I think we have to wrap it up there, but Wherever I Fall is incredible. The music in this is really wonderful. I can't wait for people to see it. Joe Wright, Cyrano, Aaron and Bryce Dessner, thank you so much for doing this, and we'll talk to you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alexandre Desplat, 2-time Oscar winner, whose new film is The French Dispatch, reunites him with Wes Anderson. Alexander, this is your 5th film with Wes. You won an Oscar for Grand Budapest Hotel for Wes. How early in the process does he bring you in when he has a script, I guess?
Yes, very early on when the script is ready, he sends it to me, and we start dreaming about what the movie would accept as score. What word we could play with in terms of instrumentation, flavor, rhythm, melodies, ideas, musical ideas.
So this one, I feel all of your scores for his movies, I feel like have a different vibe and a different flavor. This you have, I believe you did the opening and then the first. It's an anthology film, so there's 3 parts. You did the opening, the first, and the third. Did you think of these as separate films, or how did you guys talk about it? Like, did you want? Obviously, I think the sound are all different, but yeah, how did you guys think about this and structure it when you were early conversations?
Well, yes, there's one section which belongs to the reference to the Nouvelle Vague, French movies of the 60s, where Wes has wanted only songs, existing songs. So we go back to the period type of songs. And for the rest, it's the same ensemble, it's the same band, but it's a strange combination of sounds, like tuba, harpsichord, piano, bassoons, instruments that are not meant to be together in a small ensemble. Of course, in a chamber group or in an orchestra, they could be there together. But in a small band, it's more inappropriate, I would say. So that's where we start, and we always start with kind of, like when you play when you're a child, you play with the train, the electric train, and the little soldiers that we kind of gather all the little toys that we have. We decide, okay, we'll use these toys, and then from that I start writing demos, and we share that very quickly, and very quickly we find a direction that seems right for the film.
I'm fascinated by your pace because I feel like you're incredibly busy and you do so much. Do you find you're able, like, does reading the script unlock something, or able to be like, oh, I got this, and like how fast are you able to write a melody? Like I'm thinking like the opening is the obituary for Bill Murray's character as the publisher of this magazine, and you mentioned like the harpsichord. It's just a beautiful song, and it tells like a whole story in 3 minutes. How, like, for you, how do you, I guess, for lack of a better question, how do you do that? It's just incredibly, it's so incredible to listen to, and I'd love to hear you talk about a little about that process.
The inspiration doesn't come from the birds or from the clouds or from the flower in the garden. It comes from the movie that I'm working on, and if the movie has substance and the director can transcend what is in the film and give it to me and let me do what I know how to do, which is write music, then I'm inspired. It's as simple as that. And of course, it's a movie set in France, so I already have this little advantage. I'm one step ahead of the story because I'm French, even though I'm not only French, but I have some French history behind me. And what is beautiful in this film, it's a real homage from West to French culture. We know that he's living part-time in France, in Paris, but for good reason, for a true love of French culture, literature, music, cuisine. He really likes French cuisine, and actually the movie shows that too. But what I could say is that when I read the script, I always try to find what is behind this virtuosity of words, virtuosity of what will be the camera moves and production design, the costumes, and there's humor. There's a lot of humor. There is a great craft, but the stories are actually always very deep. But this depth is always a bit, blurred, out of focus, because he wants to protect his emotions. Wes doesn't show them too much. It's the same in his cinema, but actually, all the subjects that he shows in his films are very deep and very moving, and he shows that through poetry, a lot of poetry, and Dispatch has a lot of that. A lot of poetry, even for a French composer. I can feel, the movies of Becker or Bresson or Truffaut. I can see the pictures of Douaneau. All these visuals that are part of our history that Wes has captured.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the second section is Timothy Chalamet star as like a revolutionary student. It's mostly soundtrack. Obviously, you've worked on Wes's movies. I know Randall Poster is the music supervisor. He works at this ton. When you're writing the score and stuff, how much conversations you're having on how you want, or do you even consider like how they match up, or like how like the entire sound like vibes together?
No, we don't.
Okay.
No, it's his thing. He does that with Randall. It's great. They do a great job. They found little, gems, and no, they don't need me for that.
No, but it's incredible because you guys all work so well together. It's just it's as a fan of his films, it's really wonderful. You meant, and for French films and stuff, the first section is a lot more, I think, piano based. You have Benicio del Toro's character is an incarcerated artist. It's a little more, I don't know if melancholy is the word, but it's definitely more sad, I guess. I just love, like, did you have any French composers, or what were your influences on that section like?
When I first read the script, I said to Wes that what I had read was his more Dadaist story, and there's something Dada about the film, not only the several stories, but the characters, the unpredictable situations, and this opening sequence, the Rosenthaler, Benicio del Toro's character, is just unbelievable. I mean, I've never seen a painter in a huge room in a prison painting his guard as a model who's naked. I mean, who could imagine that? Only Wes Anderson. I mean, when you start, maybe I should have started there. When you start working with Wes, you enter into Wes's world, and it's something that has nothing to do with anything else. So the inspiration comes from this strange, incredible world that is taking, drawing you into. Drawing, you said that? Yes.
Yeah.
Drawing. Yeah. Drawing. Yeah. And so Dada to me is the 1920s, early 20s, and the juxtaposition of different instruments allows me to do things which are unpredictable, like we said, the tuba inserted the harpsichord, or that makes no sense musically, but it does because the movie allows that. And the piano, in that very large prison room where Rosenthaler paints these abstract works, it is so intense because the character is so intense that we wanted the music to be as pure and as sparse as possible. And that's why there's just a very slow piano, very simple, a bit strange sometimes, a bit 20s. That's why it starts like this.
And then just briefly before we wrap up, on the third section, obviously completely different vibe, way more on, like you mentioned, like French cuisine and stuff. It takes a big factor. There's even an animated sequence at the end there in the last section where Jeffrey Wright plays a food critic for the French Dispatch and gets into like a sting operation. With that, again, I'm sure it's based on the script and the story, but what were you thinking? What were your thoughts on how that should sound?
Well, you just said it. It's just you can't even tell the story, because the story, it's not the story that which is important. It's how he's rendering this story, the speed, the way the camera moves here and there, the fast zooms, the pans, and as you say, the combination of animation. To say actually that every animated movie that Wes has done, Mr. Fox or Isle of Dogs, has nourished his work as a filmmaker for live action. I think now it's really, his style has even crystallized even more. And for this sequence, it's a mix of humor, chase, danger, but not too much. It's just, we're having fun, I think, and I hope the audience has fun too.
Yeah, I think they have. I think they will. And the score is excellent. French Dispatch is out in theaters now. Wes Anderson's new film. Alexander, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dickon Hinchliffe, composer for The Lost Daughter, Maggie Gyllenhaal's new film, which is coming out in December, and then we'll hit Netflix at the end of the year as well. Dickon, Maggie's a first-time filmmaker. what were your early conversations with her like, and how early in the project did you get involved?
I mean, although it's her first film as a director, she's incredibly experienced in terms of filmmaking. She's been on sets all her life and is an amazing actress, and her family as well. Her parents have been directors and scriptwriters. So it was really funny because I didn't know what to expect, but it didn't feel like this was her first film. She felt like very experienced, but at the same time, she had a freshness about her, because it was actually her first film that was, really exciting to work with, because she'd say to me, well, how do we do this? And I'd explain that it's really quite simple. In terms of, we talked about the film. She sent me a cart. I started sending her music, and she'd send me music from other sources, and we'd just get a discussion going. But a lot of it was really about her wanting me to understand her film and the characters, and how the feeling of it, that the music should engage in it and be another character itself, rather than just, she didn't want some kind of passive sort of wallpaper type music. She wanted something that really engaged. So that was really exciting.
Yeah, it's incredible. I agree. Watching the film, it definitely does not feel like the work of a first-time filmmaker either, obviously. So that's interesting. Not surprising to me to hear that working with her was like not that experience as well. The music is really remarkable, and it totally took me off guard. Honestly, it kind of subverted all my expectations for what I thought the film was going to be like. And I guess and hearing you say not wallpaper, it's kind of like you do a lot of different things. I guess, can you talk about like being able to maybe subvert what the expectations for this kind of film would be? It definitely surprised me in a very positive way.
Yeah, well, one of the first things Maggie said was she had this idea, concept, and she didn't know if it worked, that the music would be like a found record, like a vinyl album from the past, the vintage one from the 50s or 60s, that if you put it onto play, and it would somehow magically work with the film and be its film score, which is a great idea, and it really got me going in terms of writing thematically and writing in a way that I was writing music that could exist outside of the film, like a record, which was a really interesting approach. And it kind of the whole process sort of developed from there, and so I think that's why when we say it's kind of surprising, is it's a combination of that approach, then combined with that she wanted a kind of vintage analog sound, and there's a few songs in the film that influenced me a lot in terms of getting that sound, and so we went, because she's almost shot it a little bit like an old French or Italian film, but the themes of the film are not the kind of films that would have been dealt with in the 50s and 60s. So and I think that's what makes it such an interesting kind of friction at work there. And so the music, I kind of was influenced by old film scores very much.
Yeah. What were some of the ones you were like looking at or listening to? Well, I guess.
I'm a big fan of Georges Delerue and Truffaut films. Fellini's films. There was nothing really specific. It was more, things like Miles Davis. Lift to the Scaffold. We talked about that a little bit, and although my score's nothing like that, there's something about it that the kind of simplicity and sparseness of it, I think that kind of got me going to begin with, and it's got obviously it's got a slightly jazzy feel as well.
Yeah, you hear that right away. Kind of the movie opens and we see Olivia Colman's character. Just like the music just explodes basically into the scene, and it's like really sets the stage for a great. That's Leda's theme, I guess you would say. Maybe like did you consciously try to like give everyone a different theme? I guess you have obviously like Dakota Johnson's character and everything. Like what were your thoughts and how you differed those themes? Like Leda's theme is the very jazzy one, like you were saying, I think there, and yeah.
Yeah, no, right from the get-go, we both agreed that it'd be great to have a theme for Leda, because her character is so strong and the whole film revolves around her. And again, Maggie wanted something that would sort of, really kind of play against her at times as well. And so the idea was that I wrote this theme, and then at different times in the film, it's kind of distressed and fragmented and distorted, and
really kind of quite screwed up by the end, which is sort of, I guess, in tandem with the way that her character changes and the shifts in emotion and psychological states that she goes through. But the music is very much around the Olivia Colman character, and I think there's a different theme for her when she's younger, when she's looking after her kids, and that one is more. I wrote something really quite childlike on a piano. It's like almost like a nursery rhyme, but at the same time, it's offset by these kind of swirling Hammond organs and distorted strings, and things really shifting and. The kind of contrasting worlds of motherhood and the childish state, and I think that was another area of themes that we developed and used.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was wondering if you did, because for those watching who haven't seen it yet, obviously Olivia Colman plays the character as a little older, and then Jessie Buckley plays her younger, and it is interesting to hear that you had different themes for that. I think that's really cool and really key. Was there a challenging or anything that you were like, oh, this is what was the most difficult part of this process for you, or that's something that maybe you were like surprised that you had to like overcome or got stuck on or anything like that?
I think it was writing the ideas to begin with happened very quickly, like really fast. And then the hard thing was, making a film score in terms of developing those themes and the subtlety of the film is, and the performances are so rich and engaging that the music had to be really on it to feel like it could be part of that, and not to sort of move to take your mind away from them, but at the same time to sort of enrich the world that they're inhabiting and their characters. So it was tough in terms of sort of just engaging the subtlety of the performances and the atmosphere as well, and the tone. That was the hardest thing.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like you mentioned, like I think it feels like this could be a lot of different genres, right? Like there is like a thriller aspect to it, and like all these different things, and trying to balance that out is really. I think the music does such a great job of that, because I think you're like, it totally keeps you off balance, I guess, and I think that's really, really impressive stuff that you were able to do there. Dickon Hinchliffe, thank you so much. Lost Daughter is out later this year and is on Netflix at the end of the year as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amie Doherty is composer for Spirit Untamed, animated film from DreamWorks Animation, out now and also available, I believe, to stream on Hulu as well. It's a beautiful animated film. I would love to know how early in the process were you brought on to this project, because with animated films, and especially one where there's so much music in it like this one, I was very curious to hear you. Like, how early did they have to come to you for this?
Yeah, I actually came on quite early, which was a total luxury. I think I was on it about 10 months, which was great. And the reason was because there was a song to open the movie, which started as a lullaby, and basically we had to work it out so that they could go ahead and animate it. So I ended up coming on quite early to kind of get working on the song. And then once that was done, I was like in the fold. So, I had really a luxurious amount of time to go away and work on the themes and work back and forth with the directors and producers and the team in general. I came on really early. It was delightful, honestly, compared to the deadlines we usually have, but it was really, really nice to have that amount of time.
You mentioned that lullaby. I believe it's called Fearless. It's a real banger, I would say. And it's deployed multiple times throughout the film, and really key emotional moments. I just love it. It's just so beautiful, and it sounds like a kind of lullaby that maybe has existed for 50 years, but obviously is new for the movie. Can you talk about just a little about your writing process on that and the melody itself for it?
Yeah, well, thank you, because that was kind of the hope. We wanted it to sound like kind of a lullaby that a mother would sing to her child, and it has been passed down through generations. So it's very simplistic and has an innocence to it, like a very childlike innocence. And so when I first came on, we weren't sure if I was going to write Fearless, but I basically just asked, can I take a stab at this song, because I really wanted to kind of honestly have control of the melody, because I wanted to use the melody from the song throughout the film. So the melody kind of becomes the mother's character, who we lose in the first couple of minutes of the film. So I just wanted to use have control of the melody so that I could apply it to various emotions in various scenes throughout the film, to kind of act as kind of like a warm blanket that comes down over Lucky, who's lost her mom. Lucky is the lead character. So that, every time she's alone or she's vulnerable or she's scared, we have that theme there to kind of remind our young audience that her mom is looking down on her and taking care of her and stuff like that. And then, we worked it out for the various, it's 3 times it's in the film. So it opens the film in a big celebratory festival setting, and it's in Spanish and in English. And then in the middle of the film, there's kind of an a cappella version. And then towards the end, Jake Gyllenhaal closes out the film with the song. So it kind of bookends the film in a nice way.
Yeah, you mentioned something really interesting there that I was thinking of when I was watching it, actually, about how you want the children who watch it to feel like warm, just like kind of thinking of how the child would do this. I watched it with my daughter, actually, and she's going to be 4, and she was really engaged, and I was also really engaged. And I noticed myself tearing up and getting emotional with some of your music, and obviously it played slightly differently for her. But I guess, can you talk about that when you're making something that's obviously, I don't know, targeted for children, but obviously has to also be a really emotional thing? How do you think about that for an animated movie like this?
Yeah, that's something we definitely talked about a lot on this movie. In particular, some of the scarier scenes, and just pulling back and just honestly being led by our amazing director, Elaine Bogan, and co-director Ennio Torres. And just, sometimes I would pull back and just ask those questions, how scary can we really go with this, given that it's a film, it's a family film, but targeted towards that younger audience. So there were moments where we pulled back the tension a little bit, because, you have to be aware of the emotions of the children that will be watching it. So, and similarly for some of the sad moments, in particular, that scene towards the end, the goodbye scene, without giving spoilers, just trying to calibrate the exact amount of how far we should push it without overdoing it, or, you don't want kids to be sobbing their eyes out in the theaters. Well, maybe parents are okay, but kids, we don't want to traumatize any little ones. So it was definitely something we took into consideration for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely me sobbing my eyes out. So that was good. I want to ask you, obviously you mentioned having the Fearless and the lullaby kind of as a motif throughout. What were your, it's just a big score, obviously. I think there's a lot of different, it sounds like there's a lot of different genres to me, at least. Can you talk about what influences you had? I saw you had, I read an interview where you said you had Fleet Foxes as a comp, which I think you could definitely hear once I read that and went back and listened. Can you talk about what, why you thought that was good, and other influences, I guess, for the music?
Yeah, for sure. So, it's a film set in a frontier town, back in the day. So we definitely wanted it to have that big symphonic Western score that, everyone is familiar with, which was the dream for me to write, because that's, getting to write that big beefy score and we recorded the score at Abbey Road, that's the dream. So, but then also to try to bring it and bring in kind of a modern element to it. When I had read the script, I kind of thought, what would be cool is to modernize it somewhat, is to bring in some indie folk, and contemporary indie folk. And I'm a huge fan of the Fleet Foxes and have been for years. So when I had been, before I even met them, when I read the script and I was just basically coming on to pitch in the meeting, I had taken my notes down and I'd written Fleet Foxes up the top, I wasn't sure if they'd know the Fleet Foxes or if they knew. So I had some tracks prepared, as in I'm kind of thinking this, mixed in with the orchestra. And before I'd even mentioned it, Elaine, our director, said that she is a huge fan of Fleet Foxes and had been using a song of theirs for one of the songs in the film. So it was just this crazy, moment of it was just nuts. And, I showed her my notebook and I'm like, I can't believe you just said that. It was just crazy. But then there's also within the town, Miradero is the name of the town, in the film, there's a large Mexican community. So we wanted to just like bring that also into the fold and kind of like, what would this town sound like at that moment in time with all of these different influences? So there's some like mariachi trumpet stuff, and then there's like bluegrass fiddles mixed with the contemporary kind of folk, just to kind of give it that excitement for young kids, honestly. And a little pop, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of a mishmash, but the idea was to create this melting pot of what that moment in time in that town would sound like.
Yeah, I think it really does work. Really, I just love all the influences. I think are really strong, and when you listen back and watch the film, it's great. You mentioned you have Jake singing the Lullaby Fearless at the very end. It's a great. Jake, he's obviously a great singer. I guess can you but he starts so poorly, the character, because he's not a singer. Can you talk a little about just like what that was like? I'm like to produce with him and stuff, or Yeah,
that was so fun. We had so much fun doing that. So I had written the song and we sent it over to him, and he was so down to do it. And he went away with a vocal coach and everything, and came to the session. Now we were on Zoom. I mean, this whole project was done during the pandemic, but he was at DreamWorks in a recording booth with like one engineer. The rest of us directors, me, were on Zoom. So, but we could speak directly to him. So he came in, and his first pass, like you said, he's an amazing singer. I don't know if people know that about him, but he has a beautiful voice, and he had clearly gone away and done his homework, and like he nailed it. And so he does it, and then we're like, okay, but I was literally like, I need you to butcher this song, because he performs it. I mean, the point is that Jim is Lucky's dad in the movie, and he's basically singing the lullaby that her mother sang to her at the beginning of the movie when she's a baby. But he's not a very good singer, so it's this kind of endearing moment of he's really putting himself out there, and he's nervous. And so I have about, honestly, 50 or 60 takes of Jake just absolutely going hell for leather on it. And I was crying, laughing. Elaine was every time we turned back on our videos, like no one could speak. We were laughing so hard. But then we ended up coming around, and we had him do some versions where it's super sweet. And then we kind of came in the middle on it, really. It does have that kind of endearing, he's out of tune and it's funny, but there's a lot of heart in the performance as well. But it was really fun. It was really fun to record.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's a really fun performance, and the movie is great fun as well. You can stream it now, and Spirit Untamed. Amie Doherty, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a great soundtrack. A score. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dana Pemberton for being the Ricardos. Aaron and Bryce Dessner for Cyrano. Alexandre Desplat for French Dispatch. Dickon Hinchliffe for The Lost Daughter, and Amie Doherty for Spirit Untamed, our composers panel. Thank you all so much for doing this. I guess I just wanted to start with, when did you realize that being a film composer was a thing that you wanted to do, or like was a viable career choice? Amie, I'd love to start with you, and we could go around.
I'm not entirely sure. When I was a kid, my mom would write these musicals back home for the local schools to perform, like at Christmas or in summer plays. And she would, sometimes she wrote the songs, and a lot of times she would just like change the lyrics, and it'd be jokes about what's going on in politics or in the world or in the town or whatever. And so she would come into my school mortifyingly and would throw me in behind the piano, and I'd have to play all the songs, but more often than not everything went chaotically wrong on stage, and I would just get the curtain would pull back, and it would be like, play something, like so I'm basically live scoring this chaos on stage. So I hated it back then, but in a funny way it kind of taught me to think on my feet. So sometimes I think maybe it all started there.
That's great. Daniel, how about yourself?
I started making music in my bedroom, and I got asked to do a TV show when I was still at school, a documentary. I didn't really know what I was doing. I did a couple of those, and then I took a year off from school because it kind of felt like it was going okay. So I'm technically still on my year out. I was like, let's see how this music career goes. And the weirdest thing is, occasionally I still have dreams where I'm suddenly told I have to go to university now or something. And I'm like, no, I'm doing music. It's all great. It's all fine. But it's like, it's one of those things. It can be like being a composer. I'm sure everyone here has the same thing. The days where you're like, oh, this is a nightmare. I'm getting terrible. Like just notes that I don't agree with and all this kind of stuff. But like, there's days it's so fantastic where I just get to sit around and make music. Like today, I did something today and I've been grinning all day because it's just making music is, it's great when it's in the film and that's the best thing. But even just making it is one of those things that I just feel very lucky to be able to do. So I guess I don't have other job. So I guess I'm kind of all right?
Yeah, this seems like it worked out maybe pretty well for you. Alexander, how about yourself?
Well, it started with my passion for cinema when I was 15, 16, and I heard all these incredible scores. You mentioned a few of them earlier, Ascenseur pour l'échafaud, the scores by Delerue, by Maurice Jarre, John Williams, Goldsmith, and Nino Rota. And I just got passionate about how music and images could really create a vibration that was not there if you two turned off the music. And it became a passion, and I didn't want to do anything else than write music for films. That's what I wanted to do, always.
It's great. I also think it's worked out for yourself as well. Bryce and Aaron, how about you guys?
Yeah, I think we grew up and we're kind of born collaborators, working with each other. And when we first got asked to work on films, we realized that these vast teams of creative people and responding to all the other artists and technical people and producers and things that might be a headache for some people were actually kind of built for it. And partly playing for more than 20 years in a band with 5 people where we have to kind of navigate that. I remember the first time, I think we had been doing so much with our band, and I had been doing a ton of stuff in the concert world, writing for orchestras and choirs and string quartets, and I still do a lot of that. And it was kind of for me that when Alejandro Inarritu called and asked for me to work on The Revenant, was like a really big, because he'd heard a work of mine with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and it up to that point we had not worked on a major film like that, and so that was a really big kind of moment of sort of, and a good experience that then has sort of led to really enjoying the process. Yeah,
that's awesome. And Dickon, how about yourself?
I was in a band called Tinder Six, and we wrote music that people said, "Oh, your music sounds like film score music." I did string arrangements and played violin and guitar in the band, and a French film director, Claire Denis, asked us to score one of her movies, and it went from there. Really, I did a couple with the band, and I did one on my own, and I kind of just got the bug. Really, it was something that I'd always loved film music, but I never really thought that I'd be able to have the chance to do it until. But it's like anything. When you try it, you find out pretty soon, and it's tough. But as Daniel was saying, it's also very rewarding and a beautiful thing to be involved in making films.
Yeah, for sure.
It all comes from the French.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Georges Delerue, because Georges Delerue was a big influence on the Ricardos score as well, because his stuff's so fantastic. And the thing I always find difficult is, like, I do a lot of different approaches, but just writing with an orchestra is just one of the purest, most, Alexander knows that better than anyone. Like, it's just one of the most beautiful, pure experiences of music you can have. And, it's one of those things. It's to be in a room with a huge group of musicians all playing your music is really one of the most special experiences you can have, I think.
Yeah. And then briefly before we go, I guess when people, if someone comes up to you, an aspiring musician or a composer, and they're like, "Oh, wow, I can't believe I get to meet any one of you," it would be really an honor. But like, what kind of advice do you give, I guess, or what anything you'd impart on someone who is maybe trying to become a composer or anything? Amy, I'll start with you, and we'll go back around.
Oh God, I don't know if I should be giving advice to anyone. But I guess just going off what we were just talking about, I always tell people we don't work at the bank, we make music for a living. So like, maybe don't take it so seriously and like enjoy it. And that's when I write my best music, like Daniel was just saying, when you're just like in, having those really good days of I really like, we're so lucky to get to do this job, you know? So yeah.
Daniel, how about you?
Hang on, my mind just. I often say, like, you know, I think the best thing is to write for your limitations. Don't try and write pretend orchestral music if you can't afford an orchestra. Find a different way of doing it. You know, like I'd be far more interested in someone starting out who can only play those two guitars, which I can't even play very well, and doing a score on that than mocking up a fake MIDI orchestra. I think limitations are really powerful. You know, one of my favorite film scores, The Third Man, is just a zither. And I think if I was anyone starting out, I'd be the limitations you have of resources are actually quite exciting, and like delve into those.
Nice. Alexander, how about yourself?
I would say learn how not to sleep much. And I would say learn the history of music of all around the world. Listen to everything that is good. It doesn't have to be from your country. And learn also the cinema from all over the world. That will open your mind and open your eyes and your ability to adapt to what a director is asking from you. And always remember that you're part of a group. You're just one little wheel of this huge Swiss clock that is a film.
But like a third man renaissance here with the Swiss clock and the third man reference. Aaron and Bryce, how about you guys? And when people come up to you and ask you for advice or anything, like what would you suggest?
I mean, it's we often work with young musicians or young, you know, songwriters and composers, and I always feel like we always compared our band to a turtle. Like we're not sprinters, we're marathon runners, and there's something about that in today's, whether it's your film composer or a songwriter, just not to be afraid to take your time, and that it's not a race, and I don't know, to be like turtle, at persistence and hard work equals luck eventually, maybe. So yeah, that's what I try to tell people. They don't listen though.
That's good. And Dickon, last but not least, how about yourself?
I always tell people, try and have your own voice, and obviously be influenced by other composers, other music, but have your own voice, because a lot of music can sound very similar in film, and it's great when you hear someone who's got a sound or a tone that's their own. And the other thing, and again, like Alexandre was saying, listen to lots of music, and also and the arts in general. Read. You know, we have to read a lot of scripts. If you can't read and you can't communicate, you can't understand the script, then it's very difficult to talk to a director. So, you know, engage in all the arts, I would say.
Nice. I think all of you guys,
but in French, scripts in French.
Can't do that yet.
My French is classic terrible English, and I've got to go see a French film I scored. There's no subtitles, and it's terrible. I'm gonna be like desperately trying to like remember all my French, which I'm embarrassingly bad at.
Well, listen, this was incredible. I loved talking to all of you guys. I think, Dickon, like you said, everybody, all of you guys have different sounds and very unique, and really kind of topped yourselves here. But thank you again. Daniel Pemberton being the Ricardos, Aaron and Bryce Dessner for Cyrano, Alexandre Desplat for French Dispatch, Dickon Hinchliffe for Lost Daughter, and Amie Doherty for Spirit Untamed. Check out all of those films and definitely listen to these scores. They're great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.